Chapter 24, Dances of Light and Shadow. I can smell the muffins baking now. Death. The battlefield was strewn with bloody corpses under a charcoal grey sky that heaved and threatened rain. I was dying, or more precisely, my host was dying, and, trapped in his memory, I was along for the ride. Part of my mind remained coherent enough to wonder about that. I could feel the press of metal against my host's head, a helmet which could easily hold a recollector. Was I going to experience death? The rest of my mind was overloaded by the pain that tore at my abdomen. My host had fallen against the wall of the trench, head propped up just enough to see that most of his body below the stomach was no longer attached as it should be. I could see his intestines and internal organs spilling out into the recently dug dirt. Mercifully, I couldn't feel that. My host had lost all feeling below the top of the wound. He was already dead. He must have known it, but his body just hadn't gotten the message yet. Who was I? I'd assumed this was Applesnack's memory, since it came from one of the orbs in his memory case, but that seemed unlikely now. Between the armoured barding and the blood, I couldn't be sure. Several Pegasi flew back and forth over the battlefield, searching, relaying messages or calling out names. For a moment, a familiar sky blue mare with shockingly brilliant rainbow mane and tail swooped over my trench. She hovered, looking about frantically. Her blood-stained purple suit looked nearly black in the light, and her battle saddle was scorched. Her eyes fell on me and she winced. Then she was off again. Hey! The large form of a particularly statuesque red stallion in similar military barding slid down into the trench next to me. His eyes went wide as he took in the morbid reality of my wounds. So, Sarge, we drive those striped bastards back. I felt my muzzle move, and the words came out in a low, masculine voice. I felt a drop of wetness hit our cheek. At first, I thought the other pony was crying, but then another raindrop fell out of the sky, and another, and another. Yup. The red pony nodded. Wisps of orange mane fell from under his helmet, caked a dark red by blood. He spoke slowly. You did good, soldier. Mighty good. They'll make you sergeant after this. Rain was beginning to soak into his coat, washing caked blood out of it. My host choked, coughing up blood. The taste was warm and coppery in our mouth. Post-mortem, I'm afraid, Sarge. My host's voice was eerily calm and even. He had minutes left to live, if that, and he seemed at peace with it. I'm afraid I won't be joining you when you go after all. We felt cold, a chill deeper than that from the rain. I felt drops of rain kissing the searingly painful wound. I was thankful I couldn't feel drops landing inside me. Don't talk, the big one said, looking deeply wounded. I am ready to let you go, Buck. Think the zebras are different to say. My god, my host actually chuckled. He was in utter agony. I hadn't felt pain like this since the dragon set me on fire. I was sure that my own body was screaming, and he just chuckled. Like it was nothing. Don't worry, Sarge. We won the day, right? No regrets. The big red stallion looked like he was fighting tears. My host just grinned, his muzzle full of his own blood. Well, one regret. Never did get to meet that hot sister of yours. The stallion frowned dangerously. I suddenly realised that his mane was the same colour as Applejack's coat, and they had similar freckles. Big Macintosh bristled, then burst into a gruff laugh. Now you gotta pull through. He grinned. So I can buck your backside, boy. It was too late. Darkness was already creeping into the edges of my host's vision. The Reaper pony had come to take him home, wherever home was before Celestia and Luna were goddesses. My host tilted his head back, staring into the darkening sky, feeling the rain on his face for one last time. A flock of Pegasi soared in from overhead, two of them pulling a passenger wagon full of other ponies, mostly unicorns. All the newcomers wore barding of yellow and pink, and carried saddlebags with little butterflies on them, just like Velvet Remedies. All except the lead pony. She didn't need the uniform. Fluttershy already was the uniform. Oh dear. The shy Pegasus pony looked out over the hills and trenches, full of dead and dying. Her eyes filled with tears, and she began to tremble, but she stomped a hoof down and forced herself to find her voice.
Okay, every pony, everyone, please be calm. We're going to help.
Fluttershy turned and called out to her team.
Please, if you would, take your positions and hurry. Thank you.
Seeping shadows had nearly engulfed my host's vision, and his other senses were fading fast. I was looking at the world from the bottom of a deep, dark well. Thankfully, the pain was at the top of the well, far from us. We closed our eyes. It was hard to open them again. Our eyelids were heavy, like they were made of gold. When we did, there wasn't much to see, just clouds and rain, barely visible. We were in a much deeper well. Fluttershy's head moved between us and the clouds, looking strangely upside down, cringing at the sight of my host.
Oh no.
She dashed up to us.
I think we can help. Just please hold on.
We strained to speak. It only came out as a whisper. Bit beyond you. Go help the other ponies who can. Our words trailed off. There was no more energy to put behind them. That was enough, hopefully to get the point across. A unicorn in a pink and yellow dress stepped into view.
Fluttershy,
She said, her voice the whisper of a whisper.
we're ready for the test run.
The world faded to black, a black that was all-encompassing. No sight, no sound, nothing to smell or feel. Even the taste of blood was gone from our mouth. We were dead. We should have been dead. But a pleasant warmth was spreading through us. I could feel it all the way to my host's tail. The world came rushing back like we were being released from a memory orb. There was no pain. It was replaced by the bone-deep chill. Our body was soaked in rain. The trench had become squishy with mud. We opened our eyes. Our body was healed, completely. It was a miracle. It was impossible.
What did you do?
I heard a mare's voice cry out from above. I looked up to see the rainbow-maned mare diving out of the sky, a rainbow-coloured wake stretching out behind her.
Fluttershy, what did you do?
Rainbow Dash stopped, hovering in the air, staring in utter shock at her fellow Pegasus.
We healed them.
Fluttershy said graciously, her voice somehow filled with happiness, but not a hint of pride. Several of her unicorns were trotting up to stand by her side.
I know that,
Rainbow Dash assured her.
but how?
Fluttershy blushed, looking pleased.
We call it a mega spell.
Rainbow Dash blinked.
A what now?
One of the unicorns cleared her throat, and Fluttershy took a meek step back, allowing the mare to explain.
It's a new, underlying spell framework that allows smaller spells to be augmented in scope and intensity.
The blue Pegasus looked lost and worried.
This way,
Fluttershy claimed.
we can heal everyone on a battlefield with a single spell. No one has to die because we couldn't get to them in time. Every?
Rainbow Dash turned to stare over the battlefield. My host did too. Everywhere, ponies were getting to their feet with expressions of awe and bewilderment. Only the dead remained dead. Their corpses strewn across the hills and filling the trenches. The wounded, even those at the very brink of death from impossible wounds, were healthy and whole. Like my host.
All of them?
And like the zebra who was pulling herself from amongst the bodies, a zebra sword clutched in her mouth, crackling with electrical fire. Rainbow Dash shouted at Fluttershy.
You healed everyone? Indiscriminately? Even the zebras? Do you know what you've done? Do you know how many ponies died here today?
Rainbow Dash bellowed.
And now we have to fight the damn battle all over again.
I could hear the yellow Pegasus squeak, beginning to cry. My heart broke at the sound. I wanted Apple Snack to turn towards her. I wanted him to comfort the mare who had just saved his life, but he didn't even spare her a glance. Instead, my host lowered his head, sinking his teeth into mud to pull up his rifle, ignoring the slimy texture and earthy taste. Shots began to sound across the battlefield outside the trench.
Fluttershy, get down!
Rainbow Dash cried out a moment before the blue Pegasus tackled the yellow one, sending them both rolling into the trench next to me, her wing catching the wake of a missile as it shot over the trench and exploded, raining dirt down on us. The battle was engaged. Again. Velvet Remedy stopped as we approached the massive gate that the Steel Rangers had built in front of Stapletech headquarters. The armoured plate looked like it had been taken from a battleship's hull. It was slid down into grooves in a concrete wall that bisected what had once been the squat skyscraper's courtyard. Steel Rangers stood guard along the roof and in the open half of the courtyard, accompanied by two of the tank-like Sentinel robots that had ironically helped promote the creation of the anti-machine rifle. This outer half courtyard was a mess of cracked steps and shattered cobblestones, Concrete planters where nothing grew, and a dried fountain. Above the fountain rose a cracked and badly weathered statue of a once beautiful white unicorn with a curling purple and pink mane and tail. The statue had suffered not only from the weather, but generations of graffiti before the Steel Rangers had taken possession of the building and began fatally discouraging raiders and miscreants from approaching their base of operations. Every pony else was focused on the guards in magically powered armour and sentinel robot in front of the gate. The senior paladin mare trotted forward addressing them. I perked my ears to listen, but felt a sudden hoof nudge from Calamity. He pointed a hoof and turned to see Velvet Remedy walking up to the fountain.
Hello, great-grandmother,
She said softly.
Great.
She paused, blushing.
I've sung your song, and I just wanted to say, you saved us. I'm here because of you. Stable 2 worked.
The Steel Rangers had quietened, themselves strangely interested in my friend's almost internal conversation with the statue. Calamity moved away from us, flying quietly towards her.
You got it right.
Velvet dug at the ground.
I just wanted you to know.
There was a tear in her eye as she turned and stepped away, moving to rejoin us. Calamity landed next to her, wrapping a foreleg around her in comfort. Velvet Remedy stopped, leaned into the embrace, and sniffed once, then broke away, wiping a tear, and returned to her place behind me. Pyrelight flooded out of the sky and landed on the statue, causing the Steel Rangers to fall into a battle stance. At ease, Steelhorse rumbled. I was willing to bet that, behind his mask, he had rolled his eyes. Those things are dangerous, one of the knights explained. I chuckled grimly to myself. Huh, yeah, she might lift your visor and breathe, baking you. The mental image was grotesque. Having seen a pony killed cruelly like that was horrifying. But somehow, the image of Pyrelight pulling the same trick struck my funny bone. Goddesses, there really was something wrong with me. The nightmare next to me, the one with the machine gun battle saddle, giggled in her armour.
You can't lift the visor in these helmets.
She turned to me.
There would be a serious weak point in the armour. I can't imagine such a design getting through the shield committee.
I didn't know exactly what she was talking about, but I gleaned the general idea. It wouldn't, I agreed, if protection was the primary goal of the armour.
What other purpose would armour have?
She scoffed. Intimidation. Behind us, Calamity had flown up to look Pyrelight in the eyes. You crap on it, and she'll kill you. Fair warning. A sky-rendering squeal tore the air above us. The giant arm of a crane swung into view from behind the wall. The massive, steel talons on the end of it lowered and grasped onto the metal gate. Slowly, with a tortured cry of metal grinding on concrete, the gate next to the Steel Rangers Citadel and Stabletech headquarters lifted to allow us access.
Poppy Seed?
The nightmare next to me said. I blinked, confused.
My name,
She said.
I'm Knight Poppy Seed.
At my continued blank expression, she expounded.
Poppies are the flower from Zebralands. They have seeds.
Oh, I smiled back. Little Pip. I lifted my right foreleg, showing off my pipbuck. Pip is short for Pipbuck, I told her, choosing to conveniently forget my name was my mother's play on Pipsqueak. All the other ponies in the stables have them. Even as I said that, I wondered if that was true, considering the often fatal strangeness of other Stabletech stables. I looked beyond the lifting gate, a sudden lump in my throat. Well, in my stable at least.
Really?
Poppy Seed commented.
I'd always heard that to pip some pony meant to shoot that pony with a firearm.
I'd never heard that before, and really, what do you say to that? The rest of us started to move forward. Pyrelight seemed intent on staying outside in the Philadelphia outskirts. I wished her well, expecting she would still be nearby when and if we left. She'd survived on her own for a long time. I was more concerned about the rest of us. Calamity looked back at the base of the statue, bent his head forward, and snatched a bottle cap out of the dry fountain bed. He flew back to us, taking his place walking at Velvet's side, dropping the cap into one of his saddlebags as he did so. The sounds of sporadic gunfire danced in the air. Steel Rangers trotted laps around a track running along towering walls which encircled the lower floors of Stabletech headquarters. In the lower half court, a senior paladin was barking orders at initiates as they struggled to master movement in their suits of magically powered armour. I get it, Calamity said to Steelhooves as one of the initiates bucked at a badly dented steel plate, leaving hoof marks nearly a yard from her intended target. Your armor spell matrix enhances your strength and endurance to compensate for the bulk of it, right? Steelhooves nodded without a word. Interesting, Calamity mused. The enchantment in the Enclave suit negates its weight, kinda like one of the enchantments in Spitfire's Thunder. Steelhooves glanced back at the unique anti-machine rifle strapped to Calamity's battle saddle. The thing was almost twice as long as he was when fully assembled, so he kept it broken down while travelling. Different approaches, but still, it's all about keeping the weight down. Steelhooves had slowed, staring at Calamity. This was the first time he had witnessed Calamity's freaky knowledge of magical engineering, rarely seen as it was. The senior paladin mare led us up the steps to the once grand doors of Stabletech. What had once been gleaming, polished bronze inlaid with richly varnished wood was now tarnished and discoloured metal with inserts of warped and rotting timber. Above the door, the gear-shaped Stabletech logo was embedded into a mantle over a pair of decorative nooks where fires had once burned. Ashes from the nooks had stained the walls and doors below in streaks, making the building look like it had been crying. I shuddered, feeling a chill. Cocking his ears towards the gunshot, Calamity asked Steelhooves, I take it that's a shooting range out back. If friends here ain't inclined to kick us out or shoot us anytime pressing, think I could take a few turns in it? Trying to impress the rangers, our ghoul companion retorted. Calamity laughed. Hell no, they ain't it at all. I trotted closer, my own curiosity waking. What then? Surely the 4-year running sharpshooting champion doesn't need lessons. I've never seen you miss. Velvet Remedy snarked.
Even when he was supposed to.
So, why the shooting range? The leading mare had stopped at the front door and was speaking to some pony on the other side through an intercom. Poppy Seed trotted in place next to me, looking anxious, or bored, hard to tell without being able to see an expression. You see, this new gun, Spitfire's Thunder, is a magically enhanced anti-machine rifle, made for Pegasus sniping. Calamity tipped the brim of his hat forward. It's enchanted so as to weigh only a few pounds and have only a feather brush of a kick. Fires more like a magical energy weapon than a firearm, even as the lightning jam fuel into her insides. That's why she sounds like thunder when she's shot. She fires probably 20% faster than the non-magical model and won't have a jam. No moving parts. Now it was my turn to whistle. Oh, which means she's more magical energy rifle than firearm, but she still uses bullets, just like my battle saddle. And bullets are subject to wind and gravity, so that makes an odd combination. He smiled to me, then looked frankly at Steelhooves. And that means I best get some love in with her on the firing range before taking her into battle proper. The door into Stabletech was open from the inside. Velvet Remedy pushed past us, rolling her eyes and tossing her mane.
Do you and your gun need some alone time?
She shot as she passed Calamity. He blinked. Well, yeah, that's what I just said. I face-hoofed. Velvet Remedy nickered and trotted inside, ignoring the confused Pegasus.
Does the news today make you anxious? Worried about what might happen to yourself or your family when the mega spells fall? I know and understand your fears, because I share them.
My companions and I looked around, startled. The lobby of Stabletech had been designed to be a welcoming self-advertisement. The sad, sweet voice seemed to come from right in front of us, no matter which way we were facing. It filled the air.
That's Sweetie Belle.
Velvet Remedy whispered, searching for the speakers.
Like you, I hope for the best. But like you, I need to prepare for the worst. I want a safe place for my loved ones to survive if that horrible day should ever come where a beautiful Equestria falls beneath a megaspell holocaust. It's automated,
Poppy Seed told me.
Starts up every time we go through that door. Didn't used to, but then we tried to disable it. Only made it worse.
She pointed to the large Stabletech logo embedded in the floor.
There used to be an image standing there of that unicorn from the statue out front, made out of dancing lights, like the damn ghost. Killing that also killed the interface for the tour presentation. She giggled wearily inside her armour. Enjoy.
Explained why neither our guide nor the Steel Rangers milling about seemed to pay the voice of Sweetie Belle even the slightest bit of attention.
I too need to know my family will be safe. More than that, I want them to be happy. I don't want them locked away in a dark, cramped shelter for the rest of their lives. That's no better than a prison. No, I want my family to be safe and secure, and so I want a Stabletech's magnificent stables.
Our guide led us past display cases, most of which were destroyed and the displays plundered, and framed posters on the wall, all badly faded. The posters ranged from terrifying portents of Armageddon, all of which somehow managed to be more wholesome and pleasant than the post-apocalyptic reality they attempted to prophesize, to pictures of a smiling Sweetie Belle urging parents to trust their children the Stapletech's promise of long and happy lives. All of them had a unifying message, although rarely put into these exact words. We care. You need us. You will die without us. Buy your tickets for the Stapletech lottery now. We were approaching the end of a hallway, passing a pristine sparkle cola machine. This one with a large, backlit plate showing an orgasmic Fluttershy drinking her favourite carrot-flavoured drink, and an ammunition vending machine which had been broken into and thoroughly looted. The end of the hall was adorned in false rocks, so the hallway would appear to transform into a small, darkened cave. The illusion would have been effective if chunks of plaster from the cave wall hadn't broken loose, revealing the wire mesh beneath. As our leader stepped into the cave, loud clunking vibrations echoed through the hall and display lights came on, revealing a huge mock-up of a stable door. Sweetie Belle's voice came to life around us again, the recording playing at a strangely low speed for the first few seconds, making her voice sound briefly similar to Steelhoof's. Stapletech welcomes you to our new line of
Subterranean stables, featuring our patented SAS Arcana technology. SAS technology is the product of years of dedication, uncompromising effort by our Stapletech scientists to bring you the most advanced and enduring designs based on the 3 pillars of post-apocalyptic survival: safety, amenities, and sustainability.
Velvet Remedy and I exchanged looks. The mock stable door, numbered 0, swung open on hinges as we approached while a soundtrack played the sounds of an actual stable door being pulled open. Spinning yellow lights topped off the simulation, something that hadn't been present in Stable 2.
You and your loved ones will be able to sleep in peace, knowing that our impenetrable stable doors are built to survive and protect even if Zebra invaders detonate a balefire bomb directly outside your new, safe and secure home. With only a projected 7% failure rate under even those extremely and unlikely circumstances, Stapletech's mighty stable doors are guaranteed to protect you and your family.
Velvet Remedy stifled a giggle. Before I could stop myself, I whispered, Velvet Remedy's barn door doesn't swing that way. I gasped and quickly corrected myself. I meant Stable 2's. Too late. The charcoal-coated unicorn with the scarlet and gold streaks in her white mane was fixing me with a stare that told me I wouldn't be hearing the last of this for a long, uncomfortable time. Damn it. Sometimes I hated my mother. Not that my slip of the tongue was really her fault, but it was her fault.
Still thinking of that dark, cramped cellar that you feared would be your family's home? Let the magical light of SAS technology burn those fears away. Through the magical power of Stable's appointed overmare, each stable will enjoy fully realistic sunlight, even underground, with all the warmth and joy it brings.
Sweetie Belle's voice boasted.
And at night, a softer light will fill the halls, provided through enduring Earth Pony technology.
So far, the most accurate part of the exhibit was the hall lighting with its ever-present, high-pitched whine. Of course, this nighttime lighting had been 16 hours a day, every day, all the time. The realistic sunlight promised through the overmare had been reserved for the underground apple orchard, and based on the colour and taste of the things we had called apples, I had my doubts about how fully realistic it was.
Concerned about security? Fear not. Each stable is supplied with a security level and a fully stocked armoury. Our friendly Pi camera system allows the overmare to keep an eye on every pony in public areas without prying into your private affairs.
Sweetie Belle's disembodied voice seemed especially pleased with this feature.
We here at Stapletech believe in returning your life to the level of respectful privacy that you deserve without compromising your safety.
We began to trudge through the bizarre mock stable. Its layout was nothing like the real thing, designed more like an amusement park ride than a functional shelter. Every few yards we would pass a larger window. As our leader approached, lights would flicker on inside eternally sealed rooms where mannequins would play out scenes of utopian underground life. With each room we passed, Sweetie Belle's ghost would regale us with some other aspect of how wonderful and safe living in a stable would be. After the other stables I'd been in, I found that this was creeping me out. I couldn't stop thinking about how so many stables had apparently turned into lethal traps, very not like these promises. Somehow, the reaction I saw on Calamity's face made it even worse.
Here at Stapletech, we've taken the time to think of everything. We know that, in the event of the worst kind of megaspell cataclysm, it may take Equestria not months, but decades to recover. Those of us who choose to survive the destruction may have to live most or the rest of our lives underground and see a generation born without knowing the outside world. So, each stable includes a Stapletech apple orchard, providing not only more than enough food for a growing underground community, but complete with grass for your children's hooves and mist fountains to simulate rainbows. run off of one of our patented SAS water talismans.
The other stables run out of food? Stable 2's apple orchard was, simply put, vast, which may explain why the rest of the stable never enjoyed magical sunlight. This stable tech actually designed the other stables with orchards that could only support a generation or two of growth, or was Sweetie Belle purposely downplaying the horrors that she and her two friends anticipated?
Of course, we all hope and pray that these stables will never be needed, but can any of us afford to take that gamble and not seek a place of safety and joy for our loved ones and ourselves?
Velvet Remedy seemed on the verge of tears at the parting words of her ancestor, whom we both knew would become the first overmare of Stable 2, the stable whose special purpose was to keep us down there, safe, forever. Or, I knew, until Spike could find the right ponies to cast the gardens of Equestria. I can't believe you lived your whole lives in a place like this, Calamity said as he walked up the steps that led out of the exhibit. I mean, one that actually worked. This explains so much. I opened my mouth, but couldn't find words. Only a little squeak escaped.
We here at Stable Tech hope you've enjoyed the tour today. If you have any questions, please feel free to ask at the lobby desk. One of our friendly staff would love to tell you everything you need to know.
We were made to wait in the long hall of rotting wood panelling outside Elder Blueberry Saber's office, under the watchful glares of armour-encased ponies, as Steelhoof spoke with the Elder in private. I tried to engage Poppy Seed in conversation. That worked, until I misstepped by asking what she thought of the Steel Ranger's oath, wondering whether she felt the same way as Knight Buck had about following Applejack's principles. What I learned instead was that talking of the oath to outsiders, or tribals, as she called us, was deeply forbidden. After that, she ignored all my further efforts to chat. I couldn't tell if it was because I had deeply offended the knight, or because there were other Steel Rangers watching. I contemplated trying to eavesdrop, but then I realised the guards probably wouldn't let me close enough to the door, and I wasn't entirely sure I wanted to know what was being said. I was sure there were some elements of the conversation that I would want to hear, particularly anything regarding us or Steelhoof's mission, but there was probably more than a bit of discussion about internal politics and current affairs within the Steel Rangers. Such things were none of my business, and after entering one of Steelhoof's memories without permission, I didn't want to stick my hoof into his affairs uninvited so soon again. Furthermore, I found that I really didn't want to know. The Steel Rangers were distasteful. Steelhoof was a Steel Ranger, not just a former member who still wore the armour because, for some reason I didn't quite understand, he couldn't remove it, but a current and still active part of the organisation, a Star Paladin at that, which, although I didn't quite know what that meant, sounded impressive. Between this side trip and the memories in his memory orbs, I was beginning to learn a lot about my newest companion. Well, newest four-hoofed companion, and I found I could accept most of it, although not always easily. I felt I could trust him, within certain parameters, and call him a friend, but I did not envy his karma, and I was apprehensive about where his loyalties would fall if the hooves met the apple tree. Learning about him had also meant learning about the Steel Rangers. I was interested in them as they connected to Steelhooves and to Applejack, a mare in that special circle of friends whom Spike had personally known and whom I'd grown to care about regardless of the centuries between us. The notion of defenders still sworn to the values of Applejack was like a light in the sea of darkness that the equestrian wasteland often seemed to be. But the Steel Rangers themselves, or at least a great many of them, struck me as little better than the well-equipped, more principled raiders. They didn't go around raping and torturing, no bodies hung mutilated from their walls, but they had no compunction about just sitting back and letting ponies suffer and starve and die when they had the technology to do some good. They were like Spike, only without the noble and self-sacrificing reason that justified their actions. I frowned and turned my thoughts away from internal contemplation and back into the hallway. Having decided not to eavesdrop, I slit my ear bloom into one ear and tuned my pitbuck back into Philadelphia broadcast. But instead of Red Eye, I got another iteration of March of the Parasprites. I looked towards my friends. Velvet Remedy and Calamity were sitting together, occasionally casting furtive glances at the door to Blueberry Saber's office, as Velvet helped divorce Calamity from the more egregious misconceptions of stable life that the tour had planted. I contemplated joining the conversation, but I missed a fair part of it, and both Poppy Seed and the guard seemed more interested in them than me. So instead, I sat, growing restless, bored. I stared at the pictures on the walls, tattered and age-darkened oil paintings of buildings. I recognised one of them, barely, as the Red Racer factory. I got up and started to walk the hall, giving the paintings a closer examination. There were pedestals as well, set at regular intervals, each holding a small architectural model. Most of the models had collapsed, overcome by the weight of at least 20 decades, but a few were still standing, mostly intact, an amazing testament to the model builder. When Stapletech built something, they built it to last. I was just about to pull the ear balloon from my ear when the current song ended, something both patriotic sounding and yet heavy on the use of an oboe, and Red Eye's voice spoke into my ear. My friends, let me share with you a secret, just between you and me. I was not always like this. No, once I was a young colt, irresponsible and carefree. I did not understand the need to toil, to labour, nor should I have, for I was but a child, and childhood is the time for innocence, for exploration, for happiness and growth. I was lucky, fortunate beyond my deserving, to be blessed with safe places to roam, security from the fiends and horrors of the Equestrian wasteland, and companionship in the form of my beloved dog, Winter. All the adventures we had. Sounds beautiful, doesn't it? A time of peace and joy that I can return to in my mind at the end of the day after the Equestrian wasteland has thrown at me the worst of its horrors and despair. Between the visions of my peaceful past and a gloriously bright future, I find the strength to go on, no matter how hard the path or heavy the load. But my childhood, picturesque and ideal and safe, is that what your own children enjoy? Tell me, Equestrian wasteland, how many of our children today are truly happy, truly carefree? Sadly, we both know the answer. None. Today, Equestria is a hard, miserable, unforgiving place. Our cults and fillies live in fear, violence, rape and death. The bleak and poisoned world offers our children only meaningless struggle and, all too often, a cruel and terrifying end. There is no joy out there, no hope. No more. This ends here. This ends now. One day, yes, the new Equestria we are building will offer them that same utopian security that I once enjoyed. But we cannot wait for that while our children suffer. The leaders of our past may have forgotten how much each colt, each filly, is to be cherished when they are unleashed their arrogant wrath upon our world. But we who have lived through hell know better, and we will not wait another day. As those living within lands already being reclaimed know, our nation's young ones are, and have always been, my highest priority. All that we sacrifice, we do for them, to give them a better place, and in the meantime, we strive to give them what safety and security our hooves can offer. And more than that, dear friends, oh, much more. We provide schools where they can learn, medical centres where they will obtain free treatment, the best medical care in all of Equestria, and homes where they can live together with other children, making friends, all under the watchful care of loving, approved mares and stallions. Soon, the armies of the Children of Unity will come to our town, not as an invading army, oh no, but as an army of engineers and teachers and doctors. They will rebuild your schools, establish hospitals that will provide the best care in this ruined and tortured nation, and bring to you the words of the goddess, so that you too may know unity. And once again, our children will be able to play. The door to Elder Blueberry Saber's office opened. Steelhorse took a step out. Little Pip, could you come in here for a moment? Elder Blueberry Saber was the first Steel Ranger I'd actually laid eyes on. She was a rather pretty older mare. I suspected that, when she was closer to my age, or even Velvet's, she must have been quite cute. She had a pleasant blue coat, and her mane and tail had once been a berry purple, before it turned mostly silver grey. There were still a few wisps of the original colour. I couldn't see her cutie mark. Her robes concealed a modest portion of her body. Steelhooves guided me in, closing the door behind him with his metal-sheathed tail. Blueberry Saber stood in front of me, beside a heavy iron table, whose interlaced frontal design reminded me oddly of a scaffolding. She had one hoof up on the table, although, with a closer glance, I could see that her hoof was not actually touching the metal surface. Trapped between hoof and desk was the round black ball of a memory orb. Little Pip, Steelhoof said, his voice oddly strained. I need you to look into that orb and tell me what is inside there. I looked at him, puzzled. then at the Steel Ranger Elder. She nodded with a smirk that looked ugly on what would have been a pretty face. "Alright," I said, approaching slowly. I was a little surprised at my own hesitation. Something in the room just felt off. Still, I did as Stillhooves asked. Lowering my horn towards the orb and focusing, I felt the odd washing sensation as reality slipped. Part of me panicked, suddenly thinking they were incapacitating me. A memory of my own, that of Velvet Remedy shooting me with my own dart gun, flashed through my head. And then I was no longer with them. The first sense I gained was smell. Even before I could see the barn, I could smell the rich scent of hay, overlaid with other, less pleasant, earthy odours. Sight came next. I wanted to blink as dazzling sunlight, beautiful and pure, filtered into the barn through an open hayloft. Then came touch. First the touch of the cloak I was wearing, a rough but not unpleasant cloth. Then, I felt odd. The body I was in was different, but I couldn't really put a hoof on how. I had been in earth ponies before. The lack of a horn was no longer startling to me, and the body was less alien than that of a horny male, much less my exceptionally freaky experience as Spike. But I still somehow felt wrong, and it was like an itch that wouldn't go away. My host was just standing in a bed of hay, watching as two familiar mares walked into the barn. They ambled right past me without as much of a glance. "Now, what's this you wanted to talk to me about, Rarity? That we needed to hide in the barn for?"
Well,
the elegant white unicorn said, looking at her freckled friend with the frazzled blonde mane.
Rainbow Dash said that last week at the Summer Sun celebration, she came onto you, and you didn't mind?
I wanted to snicker. Rarity had managed to strike a perfect tone between gossip and suggestiveness. Yet, I could tell, without a doubt, that she was only playing with the orange mare with the 3-apple cutie mark. Call it intuition, but I just knew that Rarity only had eyes for the stallions, and that made Applejack's expression all the funnier.
"Oh, hey no!"
Applejack nearly shouted, backpedaling.
"God dang it, not you too! Rainbow Dash was drunk! Again! And I told her!"
I really wished my host would laugh, because it was hard to be in stitches when your body wouldn't cooperate. But in the very least, I could tell Applesnack that whatever he had been afraid I might find in here was rubbish. Applejack regained her composure as Rarity flooded her eyes but failed to stifle a ladylike snicker quite fast enough.
"Oh, for the love of..."
Applejack stomped.
"Did you drag me all the way back here just to mess with me?"
She put a hoof to her freckled face.
"Oh hell, did Rainbow Dash put you up to this? This is one of her practical jokes, ain't it?" "Well, yes,"
Rarity admitted.
"It was her idea."
"I knew it!" Applejack huffed, stomping again.
"But I do have something I need to talk to you about,"
the graceful unicorn said, abruptly turning quite serious. Applejack could tell the mood had changed. Fun, even at her expense, was over. "What is it?"
"I've come across some magic,"
Rarity said cautiously.
"Zebra magic."
She stopped, measuring the country mare's reaction. "You mean like the things that Cora used to brew?"
"Not exactly, no."
Rarity lowered her voice.
"Have you ever heard of a soul jar?"
Applejack stared at her purple-maned friend. "No, and I ain't sure I want to." But Rarity wasn't ready to stop.
"A soul jar is an item. It can be any item, really. It doesn't actually have to be a jar that you put a soul into."
Applejack looked taken aback, but the unicorn continued. It was as if, now that she had started talking, she couldn't stop until it was all out.
"Putting a soul into a soul jar changes the object. It becomes effectively indestructible, for one, and you can use the soul to hang other enchantments on."
The unicorn stopped at a thought, then added,
"It becomes a foundation, not unlike a megaspell framework, I suppose."
"Rarity!" Applejack gasped. "What the hell has gotten into you, girl? Where did you get this kind of magic? This is..." The orange mare's voice lowered to a hiss.
"This is necromancy."
Rarity looked to her friend and nodded, her own eyes wide.
"I know."
Then, in answer,
"It's from a zebra book called The Black Book."
Again, she paused, thinking.
"Well, the Black Book of something I can't pronounce. A name, but it doesn't have vowels in the places it ought to. It has all manner of extremely icky things in it. Soul jars, bypass spells, Magic to tear souls apart.
With each word, Applejack's expression became more horrified. Rarity seemed not to quite notice. She gave a smirk, like she was revealing a particularly juicy bit of gossip.
If you buy into the more colourful background of the book, they say that it was written by a mad zebra alchemist who communicated with the stars through dreams.
Who is they? Applejack asked, but never got an answer.
Now, I know all of this is perfectly dreadful, and my first instinct was to burn the book and be rid of it.
Rarity said. For the first time since the conversation turned dire, Applejack looked a little relieved. That relief was short-lived.
But the top magician in my ministry says that he ought to be able to take that soul-shredding magic and rework it, turning it into a precision spell that would allow him to cut off just a small portion of a pony's soul, enough to create a soul jar without doing any real damage to the subject of the spell.
And why would you want to do that?
Think of it, Applejack! What soldier wouldn't be willing to put up just a small bit of her soul to be put into her own armour, making it completely impervious to any bullet, any weapon?
Rarity was positively glowing in the rapture of her idea.
And it wouldn't have to be those ugly metal things your ministry has been working on. We could make perfect, impenetrable armour out of dresses. Beautiful dresses!
Applejack was reeling.
And not only would our soldiers look absolutely fabulous, and be immune to the weapons of the enemy.
Rarity continued.
They wouldn't be weighed down, encumbered. Until now, armoured barding has always come at the price of mobility, but now...
Rarity? The unicorn stopped, putting her hooves on Applejack's shoulders.
Applejack, just think! None of our family would have to die in battle anymore. If Big Macintosh had...
No! Rarity dropped back, stunned by Applejack's sudden outburst. But the orange pony wasn't done. She advanced on her friend, jabbing a hoof at her breast. Don't you dare bring my brother into this blackness! Rarity gasped, eyes wide. This talk stops now, Applejack demanded. I don't want to hear another word. This is vile. No soldier would give what you're suggesting. And even if they were willing, how could we let 'em? Even some prices are just too high. Don't you think, if there weren't horrific consequences to playing with these things, we'd already be facing zebras with impenetrable armour, or bullets that could shoot through anything, or worse? Rarity stopped. She turned her gaze away from Applejack, a flush of embarrassment on her cheeks.
Oh, you're so right. I don't know what I was thinking.
Applejack let out a deep sigh of relief. It's okay, Sugar Cube. You got wrapped up in a notion and didn't really think it through. Happens to all of us every now and again. The unicorn looked up at Applejack, smiling weakly.
Well then, I'm lucky to have a good friend who can slap me out of it.
Applejack gave a chuckle. No, I'm done. Now, I want you to get back to Candlelight and continue working on your designs. You have a heap of work on your plate as it is, and neither of us will ever mention this again.
Like it never happened,
Rarity said, genuine thankfulness in her voice. Like it never happened, Applejack agreed. Rarity and Applejack embraced each other in a hug. Then, the unicorn slipped elegantly away and stepped back for the barn door. Hey! Applejack called out. Her friend stopped, looking back. And when you get back, burn that book, or better yet, have some pony else do it for you, the orange pony suggested. I get the suspicion that even reading it was messing with your head. Rarity lifted a hoof to her chin in thought, then nodded.
Yes, I do think you're right, Applejack.
She gave a ladylike frown.
That book is dangerous.
Applejack watched Rarity push the barn door open with a hoof and walk out. Finally, my host moved, stepping lightly as not to make any noise, following the beautiful white unicorn. Hey! Applejack called again, galloping past me fast enough to make my cloak flutter. She stopped at the door, calling out, And for whatever nonsense Rainbow Dash put you up to, that hug doesn't count. I was back in my own body, and back in the presence of Steelhooves and Elder Blueberry Saber, both high-ranking members of the Steel Rangers. They were wearing those ugly metal things Applejack had gone ahead and designed. Gears were starting to move in my head again. The pony in my brain was busy shoving puzzle pieces into place, and the first one that clicked was the memory of Applejack and Rarity talking in Spike's memory. I sure hope this ain't nothing to do with That thing we talked about.
Oh, darling, I gave that project up ages ago.
Steelhorse interrupted my mental puzzle solving with an uncharacteristic tone. Well, what was the memory? I blinked. I was no longer thinking that the issue was Applejack's fidelity, which should never have been in question, but I was at a loss for what had Steelhorse so on edge. Clearly, Applejack had talked her friend away from that horrifying course, otherwise, such perfect armors would still be around today. It was a conversation, I offered, my brain working to figure out how to pull the information I wanted out of them. Between the mayors of the Ministry of Technology and the Ministry of Image, I wondered if I should have called it the Ministry of Wartime Technology, but it was too late to change my wording. It was a long conversation about several things, most of them trivial. I said, not exactly dishonestly. Honestly, what specifically were you looking for? Steelhoof shook his head. Telling you would bias your answer. Elder Blueberry Saber snorted.
Well, if you won't, I have no problem telling her.
The elderly mayor smiled at me.
Tell him that this memory proves the values of the ministry mayor he so stubbornly clings to are a fiction. This memory proves that she didn't really care about the lives of the soldiers, but only about advancing her own designs. And when some other pony came up with a much better armor design, she made sure it never saw the light of day.
Oh, that's what this was about. I blinked, feeling angry now. That's what this was about? Of all the much worse things in that memory, the Elder of the Steel Rangers was focused on this? I was about to spit my bit. Standing up as tall as my little frame would allow, I huffed. How about I tell you what I didn't see in that memory? Blueberry Saber blinked in surprise. Steelhorse took a tentative step towards me. What I didn't see was my host. From the blank look in the Elder's eyes, I realised I was using terms I'd come up with myself. I had no idea what the proper term was for a memory's host was. Not that that mattered. The Elder was an Earth pony. She couldn't see into a memory orb without a recollector anyway. It seemed increasingly likely that she had never actually seen the memory herself, or that she had many years ago and lacked a clear recollection of its contents. So I tried again, keeping my anger at this nonsense tightly under control. I didn't see the pony whose memory it was, not even a four-hoof, and while that's not entirely unusual, I'm quite certain that the two ministry mayors couldn't see her either. I don't think they would have had that conversation if they knew some pony else was present. Both the Elder and Steelhorse were still for at least a moment, actually paying attention. What I saw in there was that some pony was spying on the ministry mayors, invisible. I remember that itchy strangeness, and I don't think it was even a pony. I'm pretty sure I just shared the memory of a zebra. Another puzzle piece slotted into my head. I lifted my pip-buck, saying, I found this in the rubble of a recruitment centre out near the Shadowhill facility. I played back the old recording, removing the earbloom attachment so that they could both hear. I'm sending you one of the devices recovered from Shadowhoof Ridge. Intelligence suggested that the zebras had developed invisibility fetishes, but this looks like something designed by the Ministry of Magic. It's even Pip-Buck compatible. I hate to say it, but it looks like we've got traitors in our midst. If some pony in the MAS is leaking arcane technology to the zebras, the princess will need to take action. What followed the recording was much discussion, but in the end, the only thing resolved was that I had gotten at least a little bit of the Elder's trust, while managing to sidetrack both of them far from their earlier argument. It was over an hour later when Elder Blueberry Saber got up and trotted to the window, staring out at the angry red glow coming from the walled-off portion of Philadelphia.
If you're going in there, you won't be able to do it like that,
she said.
Not with armor and an arsenal and a squad of companions.
Why not? I asked. I'm not worried about getting past the wall. I can just float us over when there is a gap in the patrols. That was, at least, my plan.
Because
Blueberry Saber turned to me.
You will never get close to Red Eye that way. He's always protected, in the very least by a flock of griffins, if not by a wing of those damned alicorns. The first sign of trouble, and he'll hop in his sky chariot and leave the city. You'll lose any chance you have of taking him down before you even know it.
Damn. I was confident of being able to sneak close until she mentioned the alicorns. I should have figured this couldn't be so easy, but I was damned if I would just give up and go home. Not after the fresh reminder of what these slavers were doing to innocent ponies.
I can help you,
The elder offered.
if you agree to help me in return.
Oh, this was going to be one of those days. The elder laid it out for me. She could get me and maybe one of my companions into the walled section of the city, stripped of our possessions and dressed in the rags of slaves. I'd have to work my way to him from there, preferably by gaining his trust rather than by body count. The latter method was likely to backfire for the same reason a covert assault would.
You may have more to fear from the inmates than the guards.
Blueberry Saber noted.
Red Eye's armies have started rounding up raiders and putting them to work as slaves along with the rest. Some of the ponies you'll be stuck with in there are exceptionally nasty refuse.
This plan just kept getting better. And what do you want from me in return? I asked finally.
2 things.
Blueberry Saber walked around the office as she spoke.
First, Red Eye has managed to develop some sort of engine fueled by radiation. He's been having the slaves mine the Philadelphia crater itself for irradiated debris, which he can turn into reusable energy to run his factories.
Steelhooves nickered. Well, that's a game changer. Red Eye's claims of building a new Equestria, at least on an infrastructural level, suddenly gained a lot more authenticity.
Indeed.
Blueberry Saber agreed. She turned to me.
I want the plans for that engine.
Okay, plans for a radiation engine. That was 1. And 2? The Steel Ranger elder frowned even more deeply.
Our intelligence states that Red Eye has gotten a hold of research into something called a bypass spell.
I felt a jolt. I'd heard of that sort of magic not 2 hours ago, and not in a pleasant context.
I want you to find his research on bypass spells, confiscate what you can, destroy the rest.
The elder stomped both her hooves.
Thoroughly obliterate it.
I raised an eyebrow. Since when is the Ministry of Wartime Technology interested in spell research? Steelhoof stepped in. Since it's a matter of survival, he explained. The Zebras created bypass enchantments midway through the war. A bypass augments another magical effect, allowing it to ignore one specific type of thing. The Zebras, for instance, used it to create balefire bursts, the much smaller version of the megaspell you are very familiar with a zebra bypass. With that, a zebra could trot into an area, crowded with ponies, set off the blast, and kill every pony within a block or 2 without being harmed herself. The mental image of an invisible zebra walking into a crowded stable atrium during one of Velvet Remedy's performances suddenly lodged into my mind and refused to leave.
The unicorns of the Ministry of Arcane Sciences failed to crack the enchantment before the megaspells fell.
Blueberry Saber informed me.
But it's impossible to know how close they were, and thus how close Red Eye is. I think, however, that you can grasp why it is in every pony's best interest that Red Eye is not allowed to finish this research.
I nodded, now imagining spells with an alicorn bypass. By the goddesses.
So,
The elder asked.
do you agree to my offer?
As much as I hated to, I didn't see another way. Not now that simply killing Red Eye wasn't enough. This is a stupid plan. I sighed, looking at my friends. Almost definitely, but it's the only plan we've got. I ain't letting you go in there alone, Calamity insisted. Especially unarmed. I smiled at his loyalty. I won't be totally unarmed, I assured him. They won't be taking my horn, and they can't take my pitbuck either. Instead, we would be wrapping my forelegs in bulky rags to hide its presence.
Why do you have to go alone?
Velvet Remedy asked, almost pleading. If anything, she seemed to like this plan even less than Calamity. Because I don't want the damn slavers to get their hooves on you. You're gorgeous, and in there, beautiful is a really bad thing to be. I need you out here. You're a non-combatant, and that place is full of enslaved raiders. Please don't make me explain further. Velvet Remedy scowled, clearly hating every word, but said nothing more. One of us needs to be with you, Calamity demanded. Why not me? At least with Calamity, I felt comfortable with a direct answer. 2 reasons, I said, feeling bizarrely like Blue Saber for a moment. First, because you're a Pegasus, and Luna only knows what they would do with a Pegasus. You folk aren't exactly a common prize down here. I pressed my lips together in a chagrin. I don't think we'd be able to stay together past the gate. Calamity was not at all satisfied. I don't care. Let them try and do what they think they'll get away with. I'm not abandoning you because of that. I'd expected that, but I still felt a wave of genuine gratitude. But before I could move on to my second reason, Velvet Remedy interrupted.
How about Steelhooves?
I can't go, Steelhooves said simply. Steel Ranger is a bit conspicuous. Velvet Remedy sighed with exasperation.
We all know you're a ghoul now. You don't have to hide in your armor. You can take it off.
No, I can't. Calamity cocked his head, giving Steelhooves a querying look.
Why not?
Velvet Remedy pushed. Because my body is fused into it, was the ghoul's answer, eliciting several gasps, one of which was from me. Oh! Calamity took a few steps back. You're that kind of ghoul. Wait, there are types of ghouls now? Other than Ghoul Pony and Zombie Pony? Velvet Remedy looked equally surprised by Calamity's reaction.
What kind of ghoul?
Here's a candlelight ghoul. Steelhooves nodded. Velvet Remedy and I were still in the dark.
Would some pony care to explain?
No more secrets. Ponies who suffered massive amounts of magical radiation and survived were forced to endure the cruel deterioration of becoming a ghoul pony. Since the zebras had employed different kinds of mega spells, it only stood to reason that there were minor differences in the effects. In most cases, these differences were barely recognisable, except between the ghoul ponies themselves. But Cancelot ghoul ponies were an entirely different sort, because the mega spell unleashed in Cancelot was unlike any other. When the bomb started to fall, Steelhooves told us, Princess Luna threw up a magical shield over the entire city. Cancelot was bombarded by hundreds of missile strikes. None of them were mega spells, like the missiles which hit Cloudsdale or Philadelphia, but they would have been devastating all the same had they struck home. But the princess kept the shield up. Velvet Remedy and I sat, listening, almost entranced. Calamity paced off to the side fretfully. I was stationed in one of the hamlets that surrounded the city, just outside the perimeter of the shield. My squad's orders were to evacuate the hamlets, getting as many of the ponies to shelters or stables as we could. The blast wash from those missiles exploding against the shield wiped out hundreds in the first minutes. The bombardment lasted hours. Steelhooves took a deep, trembling breath and pressed on. Even hidden in his armour, I could tell he was shaken, although, at the same time, I thought it was by the memory of those deaths. I would realise later it was because of what happened next. Applejack was with me, but when the strike started, she fled back to Ponyville, leaving us to do the work where she tried to ensure all her family got safely into Stable 2. I suddenly wondered if Applejack herself had made it. Had she been in Stable 2 when it closed? I saw Velvet Remedy glancing at me and suspected she was wondering the same thing. But the missile strikes were just part of the zebra's ploy. The megaspell was already in the city. A special one. After all, this was one meant to kill Luna and Celestia, not just 750,000 ponies. The pink cloud, Calamity said abruptly, stopping. Yes. Calamity momentarily took over the tale. The pink cloud was a great radioactive cloud of entropic, necromantic gas. Like taint, it didn't care if you had gas masks. Nothing protected against it. Everything it touched, it seeped into and rotted. I've heard horror stories of bodies found practically melted into sidewalks, or with their saddles fused to their bones. Cancelot is still toxic today. The streets and buildings soaked it up like sponges and are slowly releasing it as they decay. The zebras wanted the shield, Steelhooves continued. It kept the pink cloud concentrated in the city, strong enough to fatally poison even Celestia and Luna. By the time they comprehended that they were dying, it was too late, but still, they kept up the shield. I'm told they took turns, one powering the shield while the other tried to regain a little strength. That, in the end, they were holding each other for support.
Why?
I asked, feeling tears forming in my eyes.
Why didn't they just let the shield fall? The city was already doomed. Why didn't they escape?
Would you have? Steelhooves asked simply. I was still in one of those remote hamlets when the shield finally came down. The city had soaked up enough of the pink cloud that the exposure wasn't fatal, but... Calamity again added to the tale, a tone of disgust in his voice. By the time Luna and Celestia realized the pink cloud was killing them, the first attack had been hours ago. The Pegasus had already closed up the sky. The wind was beginning to go wild. With a sad flap of his wings, our Dashite friend explained. If Celestia and Luna had let that spell of theirs drop, they probably would have survived, though most likely only a fraction of their former selves. But a whole heap of other ponies would have been doomed as the uncontrollable winds blew a pink cloud out over all them evacuating hamlets, over farms. 'Twould have destroyed all life as far as Ponyville, maybe further. Mournfully, he informed us. So sorry. To both of you. I really am. But Luna and Celestia ain't goddesses watching you from heavens like your stable teacher taught you. The princesses gave their lives so that your ancestors could make it into that stable and live. It was a long time before Velvet Remedy and I were ready to talk again. For a while, we just moved away from the others, found a corner by ourselves, and held each other in silence. In that time, I decided I was damn well going to keep praying to Celestia and Luna anyway. It didn't matter if the accounts didn't match my beliefs. I still believed in my heart that somehow Luna and Celestia were up there, watching us, caring about us, giving us guidance. I just didn't know if what I believed was true. I realised it probably wasn't, but I could choose to believe anyway. Finally, we gathered together again for round 2 of every pony not going into Philadelphia with me. I have to admit, with my faith shaken, I no longer felt as confident, but I ploughed on anyways. Second, I told Calamity, picking up where we had left off. You're a Pegasus. Lil Pip, I think that was the first one. Well, it's also the second, because you're my escape route, my lifeline. No pony else can swoop in and rescue me if things go bad. I need you out here so you can do that. Calamity frowned, but seemed to find that more palatable. Wait. He looked at me like I was trying to dupe him. How the hell am I supposed to know when you're in trouble, or where to find you, if I'm out here and you're in there? Fortunately, I'd already had this planned out. These slavers, at least the rank and file, don't seem the most educated lot. I'm pretty sure they wouldn't be able to tell where my pitbuck ends and a peripheral begins, so I'm confident I can get it in with a slotted attachment. I smiled. That means either a stealth buck or the broadcaster we got from the Griffins. I floated out both. I'll take the broadcaster. You take the stealth buck. Steelhorse can activate it for you when... I know how to use a stealth buck, Calamity interrupted, holding up a hoof to the device. So, how do I get your call, genius girl? In case you missed it, I don't have one of them pitbucks of my own. I grinned as I floated out Velvet Remedy's custom pitbuck, still in my saddlebags after all these weeks of travel. Velvet Remedy gave me a pained expression. Yes, I kept it. I told her before she could say anything. And yes, I know you don't like wearing it. You shouldn't have to. This is just a backup plan if the main plan fails. Calamity raised an eyebrow. And that is... I floated Homage's override device out of my saddlebags. I have a very important mission for all of you to complete while I'm gone. I looked my companions over and decided that there had never been a better team assembled for such a job. I need you to take this to Philadelphia Tower and attach it to the mainframe in the base station. Once you do, it will give DJ Pony both eyes and a voice in Philadelphia, kicking Red Eye out, and that will free up the receivers in the station to pick up my broadcast. Red Eye's almost certainly got heavy forces guarding that tower. Steelhooves noted. I expect we'll be in for a battle.
Then, you'll definitely need a medical pony,
Velvet Remedy asserted. Calamity tipped the brim of his hat. Well then, looks like we got ourselves a plan. Go ahead, Steelhoof said, holding the last of his 4 memory orbs out to me on an armoured hoof. You've seen the others, you might as well see the last one before you go. I didn't think I was ready for another trip into Applesnack's memories. The day had been too much of an emotional maelstrom. I felt weak and fragile, like another gust could cause me to break. I put up a warding hoof, shaking my head. Steelhoof grunted. Compared to what you've seen, this one is gentle. He pressed. You trust me, don't you? To very specific extents, I admitted. It's not you and Applejack having sex, is it? Steelhoof stared silently, then he put the memory orb down, letting it roll towards me on the floor. You have a dirty mind. He turned and walked out. I stared at the orb as it rolled to a stop against my right hoof.
This isn't fair!
I recognised the voice of Rainbow Dash almost a full minute before I heard her. I was Steelhoof's, not Apple Snack this time, not with the heavy armour pressing all around me. My vision beyond the inside of my helmet was limited to the view out of my visor, but I was graced with an exceptionally complex and sophisticated eyes-forward sparkle. Within the helmet, I seemed to have access to everything my EFS and Pitbuck provided, and more. Breathing inside the armour was unpleasant. My muzzle was pressed into the rebreather. The air was cool and fresh, likely supplied by a minor air talisman, but the mouthpiece was simply uncomfortable. The armour itself was bulky and weighed down on me, but I felt strong, stronger than in any memory I'd experienced before. The weight, however heavy, felt no more taxing than carrying a light pack. My hoof steps were heavy, like my hooves were, well, encased in steel armour exactly as they were. It was, all in all, an enlightening look into Steelhoof's existence, and while I could see the advantages, I did not envy him for it. I trod down a hallway, focused on the wooden double doors at the end. This, I guessed, was an office building of some sort. Not mercifully, a battlefield. There seemed to be no imminent threats. I felt myself raise an armoured hoof and push open the door with a measured gentleness. Inside was a barely furnished office that looked almost unused. A few shelves and a desk. And this was where Rainbow Dash and Applejack seemed to be having an argument. Applejack was standing behind a desk, dressed in a suit that looked almost distinctly uncomfortable in. Rainbow Dash, on the other hoof, was wearing that same purple and black uniform I had seen her in earlier today, and years ago. Or, rather, a pristine new version of that same black design. It had a jagged yellow neckline, and a skull-shaped cloud on the flank, shooting a rainbow-coloured lightning bolt, covering where Dash's actual cutie mark would be. Both mares turned to look at me. Applejack nodded, giving Steelhoofs a smile of gratitude. Rainbow Dash only seemed to size up the metal warrior, clearly unable to recognise the pony beneath. I recalled that the Pegasus wouldn't learn about Applejack and Apple Snack until a party that, I suspected, was still a year or two away. Her attention returned to her orange-coated friend.
It's just not right!
The blue Pegasus spat, with righteous indignation.
The Ministry of Awesome is putting up almost 50 towers, as tall as the clouds, all over Equestria, and here you are having to sell sweet apple acres just to get a suit of armour to build? How does that make sense?
Okay, maybe not an argument. Ascar's building those towers is all y'all seem to be doing, Applejack explained patiently. Meanwhile, my ministry is helping fund over 4 dozen industries, giving them the subsidies they need to keep running until they can pull a solid profit. And next year, there'll be 12 more. Rainbow Dash gaped, then cocked her head.
Don't you sometimes think the Ministry of Technology is a little too successful?
Applejack nudged her cowboy hat and smiled.
No, seriously.
The blue Pegasus claimed, spreading her wings.
It's gotten so sometimes I can't even recognise Equestria anymore.
The orange pony with the greying blonde mane gave her friend a look. I hadn't noticed the grey in the other memories, although the difference in age was at best a few years. I realised with amusement that, at some point, Applejack had started dyeing her hair. I wondered if at that age I'd feel the urge to, but then I'd be a very lucky mare to live that long in the equestrian wasteland.
For example, do you really need all those roads?
The rainbow maned Pegasus asked. Some of us ain't got wings, remember? There was a clop at the door. Steelhoofs trotted to Applejack's side like a bodyguard. Rainbow Dash scowled, but moved to the side. Come on in, Applejack called out. The door pushed open, and Apple Bloom walked into the room. She was beautifully groomed and wore a business dress of mahogany and a rose that went well with her mane. She looked infinitely more comfortable in her dress than her older sister did in the suit. There was a business bag strapped to her side.
Wait,
Rainbow Dash said, looking between the two sisters.
You're selling your farm to your own sister? Technically,
Applebloom said in a politely professional voice.
She's selling sweet apple acres to Stable Tech.
The younger sister turned her head, pulling up her business bag and pulling out a clipboard with her teeth. She offered it to Applejack, who took the other end, and set it down on the desk between them.
I think you'll find everything just as we promised,
Applebloom told her sister. I noticed her voice was a touch more urbane than her older sister's. The country accent was not as strong. Steelhorse moved towards Apple Bloom, leaning close and whispering into her ear. You're not going to plough the place and build a mall, are you?
Oh heavens no!
Apple Bloom whispered back, looking uncomfortable, almost guilty. Her older sister caught the look. Hold on, you're not going to kick me and Granny off the farm, are you? Apple Bloom looked wounded.
How can you even ask that? I'm your sister.
'Cause I know that look, Applejack said sternly. And it's 'cause I'm your sister that I do. Now spill it. Apple Bloom sighed, then pulled out a set of blueprints, unfurling them on the desk in front of her older sister and the three really, guests.
Y'all still have rights to the trees and the apples, just like we promised. Stapletech is only buying rights to the land, but y'all have to move all these apple trees in this section here, and you won't be able to use the barn until next spring.
What? Applejack cocked an eyebrow at her younger sister. Why?
'Cause we're gonna be building a stable there.
Footnote, level up, new perk, a little dash. While wearing light armor or no armor, you run 20% faster.